Hey everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of The Intelligent Estate, where luxury meets smart living. I'm your host, Travis Leo, and today we're going to be diving into the world of power and the power plan for your estate property. I'm excited to explore this as it's really an evolving category, and I don't know if our guests know this, but I was listening to the All In podcast last night, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with the All In podcast. It's one of the most popular podcasts in the world, and this specific topic came up as an area to watch in 2025. They were talking about how to manage smart home technology, smart home power, and smart grids and smart breakers. So it's very timely for the conversation today. With us today is Ellie Weinkle from NXT AV in Costa Mesa, California. Ellie's the principal at NXT, and I came across a video that Ellie and his team did for a client in Southern California that really spurned today's episode. Joining Ellie is Blair Piersall, the Vice President of Sales for Savant Systems, a leading provider of equipment for the smart home industry and power solutions, particularly for estate-level homes. And so I wanted to have the two of them on today to talk about the project that they did and really just kind of talk about what's important when it comes to planning for power in today's high-end homes. So, gentlemen, welcome to The Intelligent Estate. Maybe in 30 seconds or less, give us each your quick background so the audience can get to know you a little better, and then we'll dive into some questions. So, Ellie, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Travis. So my background actually came from the defense and aerospace industry. We were a prime contractor for a lot of the major, well-known defense companies, and second phase of my life transitioned into home technology design, and been doing this for the past 10 years. So I kind of take that same, high reliability approach to, whatever we do in the home technology space that I ground my teeth down in my previous life.
And your company, Ellie, serves primarily the Southern California area, correct?
Primarily Southern California, but we do have, projects all over the country, as well as some international projects.
Okay. And Blair, a little bit about yourself?
Well, first, I've known Ellie for years, and I never knew he came out of the defense industry. So I learned something here. So that's really cool. So for me, I've been in, I guess I would call it the custom install side of the business for about 26, 27 years at this point. So seen it all go from volume controls and speakers throughout the house and all that fun stuff up into the world of smart home and where smart home is going. And for me in particular, over the last 5 or 6 years at Savant, I've actually been here for almost 13 years at Savant, but the last 5 or 6 years have really been, for me, I think one of the nice renaissance periods in my career, because I've gotten to wrap my arms around the power side of the space more and understand these products. So glad to be here.
Blair, maybe real quick for our audience that may not be familiar with Savant, tell us a little bit about the company, its heritage, and how power has become a critical component of the product offerings that you guys have today.
Absolutely, yeah. So Savant is a smart home, a luxury smart home solutions provider. We're based in Massachusetts, down on Cape Cod, and we've been in the space making products for just about 20 years at this point. Came into this as a control systems provider, so blending all of those subsystems inside of a smart home and delivering a user experience for the client that can, make heads or tails of how all those things go in. And over time, Savant has really been known by our integrators, like Ellie and others, for sort of what's next in this space. And there's a lot of firsts that Savant embraced, but our leadership team saw this opportunity in the power space, and particularly saw an opportunity to put some intelligence behind power to deliver this idea of energy independence, a resilient home, and resource management, and bring that into the smart home space. And we've been developing products around that for, like I said, around the last 6 or 7 years.
So obviously you wouldn't be developing products if there wasn't demand for this in today's estate level homes or high-end homes that are being built. So why has power, and I use that term very generically, power, but why has power and energy management and utilization become such a hot thing today?
I think there's a few reasons. It's the first is, and the one in the luxury side of the space that we run into the most is the availability of a reliable supply of power to the home becomes more and more of an issue, and we see it everywhere. Whether it's caused by aging infrastructure, it's caused by weather events, acts of God, whatever you want to talk about. The level of disruption in a typical home, let alone a luxury estate level home, caused by an unreliable supply of power is pretty significant. It's significant on the homeowner side of things in terms of their quality of life, and it's significant on the wear and tear of the electrical components that go into these homes. I think that's a major contributing factor. The other is, as all of us here as homeowners, we see nothing but just an increase in the costs of managing our homes, whether it's water and sewer or power or other things like that, and having an ability to take some control of that and be able to manage that is very appealing to a lot of folks, and just have that control.
Ellie, what are your clients talking about when it comes to power in Southern California? What's important to them, or why are you doing these types of projects these days?
So the main thing is just grid resiliency. There's always the ROI factor of it, but when you're dealing with the type of clientele we deal with, any kind of interruptions, whether it's like power outages or any other type, it's definitely a nuisance, and it could be anything from just, as I said, a nuisance to something that maybe it's affecting their business or day-to-day activities. And with current technology and available solutions like what Savant's offering, they don't have to live through these grid outages and unstable power deliveries that the infrastructure is currently offering. We've started really getting heavy in this, and probably power came on our radar probably about 8 years ago for a couple of reasons, and primarily we started seeing here in Southern California local nuclear power stations being shut down and decommissioned, particularly San Clemente Songs, and we saw the implications of that, and what was happening to power reliability in the area, and it just really started to become a strong focus for us.
When power became a thing, you mentioned 8 years ago, kind of it came on the radar screen. It seemed like it was a lot around solar and battery backups, but now it really seems like more grid reliability and brownouts. I mean, or is it all of the above that people are paying attention to when they're investing in and making a power plan for their estate level home?
That's two factors. So solar came on the market here in California, probably 90s, really heavily in the 2000s, and it was primarily an ROI thing to offset utility costs. But it did nothing for stability of the power to your home. And there's one reason for doing it, one reason only, and it's purely to offset your monthly utility bill. The reason we got involved is once we started seeing the grid becoming unreliable, we started noticing we were losing equipment on sites. Product was failing, we were having outages, a lot higher increase in service calls. And so we started really delving deep into, doing analysis and putting, power quality meters on sites, and started researching why are these events happening. And that led us to, develop the first stage in our evolution, which is really to, isolate our gear from these anomalies, and our only focus was our AV equipment, and then it's evolved into now whole home solutions.
So Blair, you obviously see this from your dealers across the United States. Is the grid getting worse? I mean, is it getting worse every single day?
I think there's some that will say that. I think there's a few things. The grid itself is pretty old infrastructure. It does get some improvements here and there depending on the utility and other things like that. I'm definitely not here to say that the power that's coming into the average American's home is so bad it's unfit to plug anything into an outlet. But that being said, things happen, stuff happens, and I think what we're beginning to see is this sort of convergence of things happen and stuff happens, And we have a lot of very high-tech equipment in our homes, whether it's an estate-level home or just an average American home. There's more tech in these homes than there ever has been, and it tends to be a little more subject to these things happen events. So I don't want to say that by and large the power that's coming in, 90% of the time is awful. It's not. But it is, as Ellie and I have been talking about, highly disruptive when these things happen. And that is definitely, cause to take action. And I think the CI channel, folks like Ellie and other integrators have been on the vanguard here, understanding that power quality matters when you start looking at systems as elaborate and complex as they're putting in. And we're now just hitting a point where we've got product capability that can actually bring that forward into the entire residence versus just an equipment rack or something else like that. So I think it's kind of a cool spot to be at right now.
So if somebody is designing or building a high-end property or in the planning stages, it would seem like a power plan becomes much more important than it was 10 years ago. I mean, we built our house 10 years ago, and that thought never even crossed my mind. Hey, we've got our incoming Xcel Energy service, and we don't really plan on doing anything more than that. My guess is that people that are building nice properties today are thinking about that differently. Is that true?
Yes. And depending on the region of the country, certain places like California, all new construction requires solar, but there's no consideration for storage. So whether that's being taken into account or clients understand, hey, this is what we dealt with on our last property. We understand there's battery solutions, and we don't have to live through brown outages anymore.
And to be clear, when you say storage, Ellie, you're referring to a battery backup or a battery system in the home, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So are you putting those in most of these projects now? I mean, are most of these homes that you're putting power solutions in, are they getting batteries, big batteries?
It's still kind of, even though the technology has been out for some time, it's still kind of like the Wild West and really the infancy of what we're seeing in construction. So it's not as widely adopted as we'd like to see. I mean, solar goes everywhere, but I'd say probably 1 out of 20, 1 out of 30 installs that have solar maybe get batteries with it.
Blair, do those numbers make sense to you kind of globally, or are you seeing something different?
They do. I think what we're beginning to realize is applications for a battery energy storage system run the gamut of customer types, and I think we have to be comfortable having those types of conversations. I think when these products first launched, everyone's natural inclination was to say battery and solar. I always like to say they're like chocolate and peanut butter, right? They're awesome together, and that's how you should be looking. But actually, chocolate and peanut butter taste pretty good by themselves. And I think a battery energy storage system does a fantastic job of setting the client up for maximizing whatever energy independent strategy they're approaching their project with. And I prefer to talk about it that way versus this idea of a power plan, because most of our clients have an energy independent strategy for their home. They're looking at a backup generator or some other process. And we're beginning to realize front-ending generators with a battery, no solar present at all, has huge benefits for the customer. Awesome. And really gets the best out of that generator when it's being used. And obviously, it's a fantastic partner to solar and other things like that. So I think understanding the applications for these products, the customer types that it suits is all super important for us.
So if I'm an architect or a builder or even a mechanical planning company, what should I be thinking about from a power plan standpoint in a new high-end home? I've heard you mention solar. I've heard you mention generators, batteries. I'm sure it's all of the above. What else, or what are all the categories that I need to think about when planning a power project for a high-end home?
Space. And I agree with backing up with what Blair said. It's a different conversation when you turn talk about like, your power plan versus, solar is really an ROI discussion versus, batteries really, hey, like, how do you want your, resiliency for the home? But yeah, there's a lot of considerations that have to happen with a battery solution based on the chemistry being used, code requirements for different municipalities based on spacing, and people don't realize it's like depending on the size of your house. I mean, it could take up some real estate to do a whole home backup with lithium-ion technology because due to fire regulations and codes, you have to have certain spacing between each of the stacks.
So I need space for batteries. I need space for a generator. I need space for solar panels. Are there other things that I'm not thinking of that people should be asking for?
Yeah, and I think it comes back to just the very beginning of your question, Travis, is certainly, builder, architect, designer, whomever, speaking to a homeowner on a new project is first, let's ask them how they would like to live in the home, how they would like to use the home, and what their anticipated experience is as it relates to energy independence. I find a lot of folks have answers to those questions, or at least sort of a blue sky view of what they would prefer to have happen if the power goes out or something like that. Every American has experienced power going out. We'd like to think about, okay, well, imagine if it wasn't like X, Y, or Z. I do think space constraints, understanding what the options are that are available to folks is important. But I think the most important thing in my view that sets any home up for an energy independent strategy is this idea of resource management, and that starts at the electrical panel. Make the electrical panel smart, give the client the ability to understand how the home is consuming energy, and give them the ability to turn loads on or off. It doesn't sound super sexy. Gotta tell you, whether you have a generator going in or a battery going in or solar going in or all of the above or any of those, smart electrical panel far and away.
Let's pull the string on that for a minute, because that was exactly the topic that came up on the podcast I was listening to last night around that, was making that panel smart. So how do I do that?
So there's a few ways to approach it. I mean, I'm certainly here on behalf of Savant. That's what my business card says. We make products that snap into standard electrical panels that allow you to see how power is being consumed at a circuit level and actually turn those loads on or off remotely. We back that up with the control and intelligence backend that Savant has created over 20 some odd years in the space. So I think that's really a great way to look at it. There are certainly other smart electrical panel products in the market. They have similar capabilities and aspirations. Control experiences vary from each one to each one. But whatever you're doing on a new project, it's important to understand as much of the home being covered by that smart electrical panel experience, and picking a product that scales to the size of project that you're working in, I think is super important.
I came across, as I mentioned, that video that you guys did of a project that LEU led in Southern California. Maybe talk a little bit about that and how that client experience or the manageability of that smart system was important to that client.
Yeah, so he's in an area of Laguna Beach. I mean, Laguna Beach in general is a little isolated and tough to get to, and so they're also pretty anti-development. So the grid there is pretty outdated, and out of any of our areas that we service, that's probably the least reliable grid we've ever experienced. So one of the things, client had a couple things. One, he's an art collector, so aesthetics was big for him. So whatever solution went in, he wanted to complement the house versus being an eyesore. Also here in Orange County, there's very few properties that you can actually put generators on. So that wasn't an option. And then the third thing the client wanted to deal with is offset his utility costs. And the beauty with Savant, it kind of tackles all of those. It's a centralized hub that is, as Blair mentioned, we've got intelligence into the panel and the loads and, where the power is going and what in the home is consuming that power, and we have the ability to, beyond just understanding that, also shed loads if needed. They handle all the grid connections, the storage, and converting solar to power that's usable. And so when you combine all those things, basically it became the obvious solution to our client, and he's extremely happy with it. And it's pretty amazing once you put one of these systems in. It's one of those things, until you have it, you don't understand like how much you need it, and then all of a sudden you start seeing it's like, wow, since the system's been installed, we might have had 20 outages on this house. Could you really go back to living without it at that point? It's ignorance is bliss, they say, right? But once you're once you've been exposed to the other side, it's hard going back.
And you've both brought up something that I think is important, which is around the experience around it. Like the notion of appifying an electrical panel probably isn't new, but doing it well and being able to manage all of this and adjust and load shed and do things dynamically. What's changed that has allowed that to work so much better than it did 10 years ago?
Software and also hardware offerings. Savant has a unique product. So as Blair said, they're not the only, panel level solution. But unlike their competitors, in my opinion, it's the only solution that you could decentralize. It doesn't require you doing a full panel upgrade. You can take a client's existing home and add flexible load management, add energy monitoring to the existing panel without having to do a major destructive overhaul in the home.
Yeah, and Travis, I would say another thing that I think maybe hasn't changed, but is an innovation that's come to fruition over the last handful of years here, is the idea that we can develop an automation strategy that can talk to the battery system and talk to the smart electrical panel to make it so that the client really doesn't have to do anything at all. All of these load shedding strategies are built for them. They happen on behalf of them based on certain grid events or other things like that. With proper automation, especially when you're resource managing the power that's coming into the home, automation is key for it to just have that smooth, frictionless, awesome experience, and give the customer enhanced control if they would like it. But generally speaking, it just goes in the back end and does what it's supposed to do. And I think the elegance, Ellie, is what most people can't really live without. The power goes out, you get a notification in your app, unnecessary load shed to preserve, battery storage and make the battery run longer. Grid comes back and all the loads turn back on, and you're like, okay, that was money well spent. That's a great experience.
That was the key. What you said is it does what it's supposed to do. And when a client gets a notification that their house is going to storm watch mode without any input on their end, and they're like, oh, wait a minute, it checked the weather, it sees an upcoming storm, it's going to top off the batteries and keep them on reserve instead of doing daylight harvesting, it puts a smile on their face.
It sounds like a well-done system has a lot of this built into the background, but it then also allows the user to manage or adjust or even really just view what's going on and understand. Because I think part of the challenge with any of these solutions out there is I don't really know what's going on, right? Is my solar system feeding my battery? Is my generator on? Did I shed this load? It sounds like the systems that you guys are deploying, doing really give the customer that intelligence that allows them to see it and feel good about the purchase decision, I guess. Is that a good way to say it?
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of what we do, it's people like, oh man, I want things simple in my life. I want my home simple. And, everything, the custom integrator channel does, people view it as overly complicated. And it's like, yeah, I don't need, lighting control or motorized this or automated that, but in reality, yeah, we can give them very granular control, but the whole idea is to simplify their life, simplify the interface, basically allow the system to just work within their lifestyle versus having them, really have to make the system work.
Well, let's actually expand on that for a second, because you mentioned the custom installation or custom integration channel. To me, as a person who would look at this as a homeowner, and I would say, well, this is something that my electrician would put in, or I would pick your favorite local solar company and have them do all of this. So how should architects, builders, homeowners think about the custom integrator versus the electrician versus the solar guy versus the engineer when it comes to these types of solutions?
Yeah, they all have their place, and think of it as a kind of like a three-tier type solution. So at the bottom of the tier, like your basic system is going to be your solar installer. These are cookie cutter. This is the solution we sell. It's a package. They've got fixed pricing, and we're going to give you X amount solar with or without battery. We can add on a single battery for here, and this is the install price. And they're going to come in, they're going to do it the way they do it, and you're going to get what you're going to get. You want to go a little more custom for that, have a little more thought process involved. That's when you get, electrician, and I would say more along the lines of maybe a master electrician. And then you can kind of get a little more deep into engineering, where they're going to basically, their ability is going to end is when it comes to the software, the integration, and bringing the whole ecosystem together. And that's where, you really need an integrator. We'll look at the full package. We put our hands in the whole system versus just, the power side, the solar side, the control side. And we try to design a complete ecosystem that will meet whatever that client's demand is. So, solar companies usually can't do anything beyond a 200 amp panel service. So, I've been plenty of homes where a client will have maybe 4 loads in their house backed up on the battery. And then when they get an outage, everything else is done versus, with the solution like what Savant offers, we can do a full 800 amp panel backup. And, if the client wants to run 100% of their house in an outage, we can design and engineer a system that will allow 100% of their house to run.
As long as you have enough space, right?
As long as we have enough space and, budget permits.
Blair, would you agree with that when it comes to the sort of capabilities of the different trade parties that we just talked about?
I would, and I would say, the energy contractors, the solar folks that are out there, I think they do an absolutely fantastic job in deploying solar applications for homes. This is a highly specialized process involving like standing on roofs and installing stuff and everything else like that. And I think that's a very important skill set to bring to the table here. I think Ellie's correct from the battery energy storage system side of the things. The solutions your typical energy contractor are putting into the market are really focused on 80 to 85% of the American homes. The folks listening to this podcast are not focused on 80 to 85% of the American homes. I think the percentage is much, much smaller. And that's where I think a very skilled electrical contractor and a very skilled home technology integrator come into play. That's where we've seen the best end result from any of these systems. The home technology integrator, I think, has an understanding of the programming at the back end that's going to deliver that sort of elegant experience that we talked about earlier. And certainly a really awesome master electrician can whip off an install that'll just knock your socks off. And that's really how these should go together generally.
So there's a partnership that goes along with
Absolutely.
the best installs that you've seen.
Yep.
Let's talk financials for a second. So one of you mentioned the return on investment or conserving energy. Is there an ROI on these solutions, or am I putting these in because it's an experience that I want and the reliability is something I'm willing to pay for absent a federal tax credit or whatever might be out there today?
Both. Oh, go.
Yeah, I was going to say there's both. I can speak to this, Ellie, and maybe from personal experience you can as well. I think it's a little of both. I think in the 80 to 85% of the American homes that are looking at investing in rooftop solar and a battery energy storage system, there is an ROI story to tell for those homes. They're typically smaller, and the needs from an energy standpoint are not as high a demand as a luxury level estate. I'm sort of fond of saying if you wanted to save electricity, you're not going to build a 20,000 square foot home. It's just not what you're going to do, right? And I think most people go into that project understanding it. I think in the estate level project, energy security and energy resilience is the number one driver of that solution, regardless of cost. And the fact that you might be able to save a little bit of money on your electric bill, which is probably higher than you want it to be, is a great added benefit as well. But I do caution folks against trying to play an ROI game in a very, very large luxury style residence, because it'll just eat power in a way that is sort of a dominating factor. That's where I also think this idea of resource management and understanding how the home is consuming power is so important, because we can take really aggressive steps when the battery system is running to make sure that we're getting the best result for the client. But Ellie, I don't know if that's what you were going to say or not. Kind of
100%. And you know, ROI is a tough conversation to have, at least in California now, because the way net metering works, we went from a NEM 2.0 to NEM 3.0, and it used to be energy credits were traded a 1-to-1 ratio. So, right now I buy power at 50 cents a kilowatt. I sell it back to the grid at 50 cents a kilowatt. With 3.0, you're buying it on pennies on the dollar. So your system basically will offset your current usage, but any excess you're giving back to the grid, you're basically giving that back at pennies on the dollar. So what can you do with that? Well, instead of giving it back for free, you might as well store it.
So don't plan on an ROI. It's a nice added benefit, but you're doing this for the experience that it can provide and the resiliency that it will give an estate level property.
Correct. And as Blair mentioned earlier, I almost think because we went to NEM 3.0, I almost feel that a standalone battery solution is more important than solar.
Expand on that a little bit more.
Well, if you're not getting the ROI, previously solar systems had an average ROI. The goal was if you did a cash purchase outright, which is the fastest ROI versus doing like a finance or a leaseback or rental on your system, basically a 4.5 year would be about the fastest ROI you can get. Now that 4.5 year ROI is somewhere between 11 to 14 years on a cash purchase. So you're not really buying this for return on your investment. So what's the solar doing for you? The batteries, on the other hand, do add an day one benefit by giving you that resiliency we've been talking about.
Yeah, and I would definitely say as we're understanding motivations, don't discount or discredit what energy security means to a homeowner. If you talk about this idea of you don't even notice that the power has gone out, home has a clean, reliable supply of power in an outage, that may very well check the boxes for a large number of folks that are looking at this type of stuff and may put it right up at the top of the list of what they're interested in.
To expand on that for a second, Blair, are you seeing these solutions go into urban settings? Are they going into these more kind of rural properties where grid reliability or resilience may be more of an issue from either from a natural disaster or just the grid, or is it all of the above?
It's all of the above. I think we're seeing them in urban environments right now. New York City doesn't think very kindly on lithium-ion based battery chemistry, so not there, but. We're seeing them go in downtown Chicago. We're seeing them go in the outskirts of Chicago. We're seeing them, all over the country. I think it's interesting as we look at this idea of energy security and energy independence. I think at last sort of survey, it was about 15% of the American homes had a backup generator on them. Now, when I heard that number, that surprised me, thinking about all of the homes in the United States. Now, think about that with a state-level client base. That number probably jumps up into the 80-85% of those homes have some sort of energy independent strategy. So I think for a lot of these clients, that's a mover in either direction and makes a battery system something to think about, and is why we're seeing adoption across so many different spots.
You mentioned the regulatory challenges in New York City. Are the municipalities getting on board with these? Are they fighting these? Is it a combination of all of the above? Or is it particularly battery technology? I mean, I flew the other day and I had a lithium-ion batteries in my checked bag, and the lady's like, you can't do that anymore. Everybody's concerned about fire and lithium-ion batteries. Is that what people are concerned about with these solutions?
I think, the biggest thing to me that's driving this at the utility level, or especially at the local level with the permitting authorities and all that type of stuff, is a lack of knowledge around this technology, how fast it's moving, what it's capable of doing. I have one of our battery systems in my home. Just shameless plug. I love it. It's great. My wife thinks it's the best thing ever. But when we had all of our inspections done at the town level, our electrical inspector was very unaware of the technology. And when he heard I worked for the company that made it, it turned into an impromptu education session around the entire thing. Ellie, I'm sure you're doing the same thing when you're bringing those in. So if we need to do a better job at something, I would say it's pushing outwards to the utilities or that local permitting authority to help make them aware of this technology and not to just discount it and be afraid of it.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many inspectors we've had come on sites for final and basically just flat out say, I have no idea what I'm looking at. You want to do, they want to framing inspection, foundation inspection, plumbing, electrical. They've been doing that since, the beginning of their career, but this is really new for most of them.
My guess is if you have electrical inspectors that don't know where to start, you probably have builders and architects and design firms that don't know where to start either. So if you were to advise somebody who's listening to this or beginning the planning for a high-end custom home somewhere, where would you both tell them to start? Ellie, I'll start with you.
As early as possible. This should be planned during mechanical design. The way we lay out panels changes because we intercept everything in the house. Because if we're going to design a system, I'm from the school of thought is let's back everything up. And if something doesn't need to be backed up, then we have the ability to load shed it in an outage situation. We need to plan this, and to do this correctly, there's more panels involved than a traditional electrical plan would normally have.
So start early and involve an expert at the engineering process?
Correct.
Blair, would you agree with that?
I would completely agree with that, and I would say start even earlier and do as much as you can to get yourself educated about all of the solutions that are available, how they differ, how they all work and interact, so that you can, at the front lines, have that discussion with your client, our client, right, ultimately, and give them the best possible experience. I find, we've done a lot of meetings with architects and other folks like that, and we're beginning to see, I think that group got caught a little flat-footed as it relates to this technology, and we're working really hard to bring folks up to speed, because clients are asking these questions right at the beginning because they know they should.
They know that reliability and independence is just very, very important to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's coming next, guys? What's hot? What's new on your radar screen that you're paying attention to when it comes to this stuff right now?
The thing that excites me the most is development in battery chemistry, and where that's going. And I'm sure in Black Ops or whatever Savant's doing with their top secret engineering projects, they're exploring all the new options. But that's really where I see kind of the next phase of this going is in advancement in battery chemistry.
Blair, what about you from the manufacturer standpoint?
I think advancement on the battery energy storage side of the space and making those products, bigger, faster, more resilient is always interesting to us. I think the biggest advancements short term that we're going to see is making the software behave as proactively as possible for the client. So just taking every step we possibly can towards a fully resource managed home. And so we're starting at the electrical panel where we give people that visibility. We're looking at appliance integration, and particularly as it relates to big energy consuming appliances. So we have an integration coming with an electric hot water heater, which is a tremendous energy consumer in a house. And most people don't know it because they can't see it on a daily basis, and starting to integrate those into that smart home experience. Just to get the very best out of that for everyone.
Is there a rule of thumb if I'm an architect, a builder, or a client thinking about putting one of these in my property, $1 per square foot or $1 per load or anything that you can provide that would get people thinking about how they should think about the cost elements associated with something like this?
Well, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, so I'm a big walking, talking numbers kind of guy. And I particularly like to start with this idea of the smart electrical panel. We tend to show those products off. Ellie's used them on his projects. They all have little LCD screens on them, so everyone thinks they're super expensive, and they're actually not. So if you think of backing up a single 200 amp panel, well, not backing it up, but having modules and control over a single 200 amp panel, you'd be looking at around $3,300 MSRP to do that. That's a great walking, talking number. So if you have a 200 amp service, think that number. If you have a 600 amp service, multiply by 3. And I like that to just sort of like demystify that whole thing and give everyone a sense. The battery systems scale similarly, but generally it's it really, for us, depends on service size. Like Ellie, we prefer back up that whole service, right? It's the best possible experience. And, you know, for a 200 amp service, you'd be starting somewhere around $30,000 and moving up as you move into bigger services.
Yeah, the conversation's more along the line the panel size and service size versus square footage. So, you know, everything Savant does is in terms of storage is in 100 amp increments. So you kind of that's the way to approach the conversation, in my opinion.
I like that. So for a 200 amp service, though, and I can multiply by X to get whatever my particular feed is, 30 grand for a battery solution and 4,000-ish for the panel, the intelligent addition to the panel. So
yeah.
That's, I think, very helpful for our listeners that are trying to figure out if this is something they want to incorporate into their project going forward.
And these are most likely hardware costs, so they'll have to, you know, there's going to be additional fees in terms of, like, you know, engineering, permitting, you know, electrician, programming, so on and so forth. But in terms of equipment purchase, that's kind of like where those numbers start.
Yeah, the labor's a tough one. It varies wildly.
Is it new construction, or we have to reinvent the wheel on a old, like, 30-year-old home?
That actually raises a question that I probably should have asked earlier. Are you putting these systems into existing homes, or are they only going into new construction projects?
All of the above. One of the very nice things about the battery systems, particularly a whole home battery system, is it's actually easier to retrofit in than a partial home battery system. Because if you do a partial home system, you have to pull loads out of the existing electrical panels and try to figure out who's on the battery, who's not on the battery. If it's a whole home, you're just interrupting the electrical service coming into the house with the battery system and then feeding the rest of the home. So I think it is a very applicable retrofit or renovation style product, and then of course new construction as well.
Yeah, and Travis, to that point, that the video you were referring to earlier that we just did with Savant, that house was built maybe in the 40s or 50s. So, you know, we're talking about a 70, 80-year-old home.
If it's an existing home, you actually have a sense of how much energy it's currently consuming, and it really helps when we're sizing. Whereas in a new construction application, we might size up a little bit, just anticipating whatever could end up going on. But you can decipher an electric bill and actually get the average load of a home and then figure out from there, okay, what estimated battery runtime am I looking for? What would I like to accomplish? All of those types of things.
That's a good point, that you actually have historical data that
Yep.
you can base your planning and design off of there.
Yeah, the utility history is very, very beneficial, because I mean that's real numbers.
And there's seasonality in there. If they give you a 12-month rolling, you know, you've got the peaks and valleys all built in.
As we begin to wrap up here for the conversation, if I've listened to this and I'm interested in starting a project or exploring this for my home, Blair, where should I start?
Shamelessly, I'll say go to the Savant website, savant.com. We have a whole power section on our website, which details, you know, our approach, all of the solutions that we have that are available, and then we can point you in the direction of an integrator that can help you out.
And Ellie, if I'm in the Southern California area, are you actively taking on new clients and you're not oversubscribed right now with all the work you've got going on?
100%, you know, power projects actually get us excited. So, you know, we're actively and aggressively looking for them, and it's something that I'm very passionate about.
Well, I will share you guys' contact information with our video viewers, along with a link to the project that I mentioned, and I would encourage everybody to spend a few minutes watching that video. It really caught my attention, hence the reason we wanted to do this, because it really showed the value that and utility that a client got out of something that I probably wouldn't have thought that you could get that excited and that interested about grid reliability, resilience, and power. And clearly you guys made a difference in that client's life, and that's the reason we wanted to have you guys on here today to talk about that. So.
I'll tell you what, they had Christmas, like permanent Christmas string lights on their house, and they did some remodel during this install, and they pulled those down. And it was one of the things the client was the most depressed about, because, when he looks out the window and everyone's lights are out and he's got them on, that's the time where he wants to turn his Christmas lights on just to show off to the rest of the neighborhood,
It's a wonderful world we live in, isn't it?
Yeah.
So. Well, guys, thank you very much for your time today. I sincerely appreciate you educating our listeners and viewers on what's new and smart power and how to create a power plan for their intelligent estate. So I'll put your contact information up here, and hopefully people will reach out if they have questions. So thank you for joining us on the Intelligent Estate today.
Thanks, Travis.
Thanks, Travis.
Thanks to Ellie and Blair for a really fun conversation around power planning for estate level projects. I learned a lot about the cost of these types of solutions and what's really important when people are considering whether they should implement this type of resilience and backup plan when they're building a new home. Coming up on our next episode, we're going to discuss what you should think about when buying a high-end home with an existing technology system. We get this question a lot. If you've got a home that's got a high-end system, is that an asset or is it a liability? We're going to bring on a couple of experts to discuss whether that technology is an asset or a liability and how you should think about the lifespan of that technology system. Before we wrap up, I've got a couple of listener questions that have come in. First of all, I'd just like to thank people for listening. We're now on episode number 5. I've really enjoyed doing this and getting better at it. Our audio quality is getting better, so I appreciate people engaging with us. Steve asked, quote, "The Wi-Fi coverage in my house is bad. What can I do about it?" Steve, this is a question that I get a lot, particularly in the larger estate properties. The bigger it gets, the poorer the Wi-Fi coverage tends to be. We're going to dedicate an upcoming episode to talk about network planning for estate level properties, how you should think about access point placement, both indoors and outdoors, how you should think about an enterprise grade infrastructure for your home, where those access points should be located, the wiring necessary, and the technology that goes along with them. I know a lot of people who have really good Wi-Fi coverage in their home because they thought about it at the beginning stages. They didn't treat it as an afterthought. That's probably the biggest piece of advice that I can give you. As a follow-up to our episode on lighting design, Austin asked about lighting designers and how much they charge. Austin, there's really no great answer to that. I've seen people do projects for $1, $2 a square foot, but if you're building a high-end estate level property and you want to do a really nice lighting design, I think you can expect to pay a little bit more than that. If you want some basic layouts and some nice features, yeah, you can probably get away with it for $1 or $2 a square foot. But if you're hiring a high-end lighting designer, which is what I would recommend, because the lighting in a home can make such an intelligent difference in the home, I think you're probably going to be paying a little bit more than that. It's going to vary definitely by market and by the services offered, but I would reach out to 2 or 3 lighting designers. It's probably more important that you just have the right vibe and the right feel with those people than how much they charge. And I realize that's easy to say when it's not your money, but I think if you reach out to a couple of lighting designers, you'll get some different levels of services that they offer. And from there, you can probably pick a good, better, best solution that fits your budget. Guys, if you've enjoyed today's episode, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, leave me a quick rating or review. We're really just trying to get more design lovers and homeowners and people to find the show. If you've got questions or ideas or just want to show off parts of your own intelligent estate, reach out to us on Instagram at the Intelligent Estate Podcast. We'd love to hear from you and maybe even feature your question in an upcoming episode. Thanks for spending time with us today, guys. I really appreciate it. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.